Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever. Today we're going to be having a look at the brand new Marvel Legends 20th Anniversary series, Iron Man. Now, this is the first series that Hasbro is doing to celebrate the long legacy of the Marvel Legends line. I can scarcely believe that it was 20 years ago this year that I was walking around in Walmart and finally found the series of figures that I've been reading so much about in the old Toy Fair magazine, which was an offshoot of Wizard. I still remember how hyped up I was to get that brand new Iron Man and Captain America. Those were the two that were really on my list that I was the most excited about. Now, it's been a lot of years since I sold off those kind of early Marvel Legends that I used to have because the collection went in a different direction, but I'm really glad to see that they were able to kind of homage that with this. And we're here today to figure out just how successful of an homage this is and if it's worth the premium. As you can see, I have all of my other modern Iron Men kind of anxiously awaiting the review, so let's go ahead and look at the packaging. Of course, he comes in beautiful retro-styled packaging. You can see the little comic book facsimile back there isn't very well secured because it just dropped down. But it's funny to look at the packaging because it gave me the weirdest feeling when I got it out of the box. I got this from Hasbro Pulse. It really did do weird things to my brain, seeing that border on the side right there, the old blue color. Even things like the little Marvel logo on top and all of that, and that funny background. It just brought me back. So especially seeing this old font right here. So it definitely hit me right in the nostalgia. The back also does a good job of homaging that original packaging. And you can see they have a really cool render back here of the figure, all posed up with an art version of his original 3D display stand. We get a cool little summary about what Marvel Legends was and when it debuted, and talking about the original Series 1. Now, so far, all these have been revealed, except for Toad, so it'll be interesting to see how he turns out. Here is the UPC code, and here we have our 20th anniversary Marvel Legends Iron Man out of the packaging. And I have to say, there's a lot to discuss with this figure, plenty of things that I'm not so sure about. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. It's very difficult to discuss this figure without first acknowledging the simple fact that this is an extremely familiar Iron Man mold. We have seen this used again and again and again, and of course it was done a while back for their kind of Alex Ross inspired series of Iron Man and Captain America and Thor. It was a great body mold. It definitely looked like the old comics and things, and had all the details that you expect, those classical kind of Iron Man details. And it was a great way to kind of update that original Iron Man look. Now we have a brand new head sculpt where he actually has the horns on the head. Now, Iron Man wore this kind of earlier on in the comics, like in the 60s, and it's definitely an interesting look, and it's one that I've always liked, but it was one that I've kind of seen as more just a part of the character's history and not like a definitive look for Iron Man that I could put like right in the front of my display and say, okay, this is classical Iron Man. To me, this is more of like retro Iron Man, so it has a very different vibe. The latest release of this body mold is this one, and this is more of your like hologram Iron Man, where it's like kind of got blue details on it, but you can see that it's practically the same. These colors are a little brighter, a little more vivid. These are a little more muted, probably to match the original Marvel Legends release, and it's the same thing except for a few little details. The little kind of half spears aren't there on this armor because, you know, those would kind of appear and disappear throughout Iron Man's print history. It's pretty similar in a lot of ways. Unlike a figure like, say, Captain America, that seems so new, versus this, which seems so similar to this last release that we got with the Shang-Chi wave. And it's funny because they're in the same series. And like I said, the head sculpt, it gives a very different feel than the Captain America head sculpt, which the Captain America head sculpt, I'm sure most would agree, is now probably their definitive de facto Captain America sculpt. And this probably just won't be because it's so, you know, retro specific. Let's talk about the history of the actual Marvel Legends figure. You can see the actual Marvel Legends figure, the regular version, standard non-horned mask, and that's the one that I got. There was a Chase version that did have the horns on the mask, but I have a hard time believing that they're wanting to homage the Chase version of the figure. It seems like a weird decision to me, and I know that their idea was that, hey, we should do something different because we've just released the other ones and collectors want something different, and I think that that's smart, but at the same time, it's an odd choice in a wave that you're already releasing a very definitive-looking version of the Hulk, a very definitive-looking version of Captain America. I think that that probably would have been much smarter. Also, because these are priced at a premium price point and they don't include a Build-A-Figure piece, you would really think they could have sprung for a third head. And I know that that sounds exorbitant because you already have the unmasked head, which we'll get into in a second. But I just feel that that would have been a very easy thing for them to do, a very cost-effective thing for them to do. They could have packed it out with this head to have made it more apparent that this is a different kind of product. And I do feel that it was them cheaping out a little bit. I do have very mixed feelings about the release in general, so it's very important for me to go over that right away. Like I said, you can see the sculpt and the kind of cool line work on it, and there's a nice wash in that to make sure that you can see those lines very well. And it does a good job of mimicking that old original retro artwork, particularly from early issues of the Avengers. And that's where you'd see this horned helmet quite a bit. The articulation is exactly what you would expect. There is a hinge up here on the head. There is a rotation at the waist. There's a really good ab crunch that can do so much, and it's sculpted well to where it doesn't look so jarring. You can see that there is hinges at the shoulders which go a little bit further than 90, which is nice. They can go all the way around. There's a cut right there at the top of the bicep. There's a double jointed elbow there, but the gauntlet kind of gets in the way of you doing much with it, but it can go well past 90. There is a rotation and a hinge at these regular fisted hands. Now his open repulsor hands don't have that hinge, which is kind of a shame. Moving on down, we do have a rotation at the thigh right here. We can do the splits pretty well before the trunks kind of limit it, but I don't think Iron Man's going to go any further than that anyway. He has an excellent kick that rivals like the most flexible Power Rangers. So it's really funny to see a man in a suit of armor have such a great kick. Then you can see that he's got an excellent double jointed knee. It doesn't look very natural. And of course we have a rotation at the boot. We have a really nice hinge at the ankle, and you can see you can go really far down, really far up. And of course we have a pivot so that you can get those really, really wide stances. As I said before, I do have mixed feelings about some elements of this figure, and there's still a few more that I'm going to go over before the review is done. But one thing I don't have mixed feelings about is this superlative Tony Stark head. For those unaware, Marvel were always very smart about making sure that Tony looked like a modern man, I guess. Looking like, you know, you could see him in the headlines of a tabloid. So they were always careful to update his hairstyle, update kind of his look so that he never really seemed out of date. And in the 70s, they kind of did the same thing by giving Iron Man more of this kind of a voluminous kind of hair, which kind of looks like he had gotten, you know, a man perm. To us, it seems retro-y, but at the time, it was a way, and giving him the sideburns and things, it was a way to keep Tony Stark relevant. And of course, they did the same thing in the 80s when they gave Tony a Jerry curl perm, and they did the same thing in the early 2000s when he had the goatee and the shorter hair and things. So they're always finding ways to update him. And this head is such a great piece of work on the Marvel Legends sculpting team. It just does a perfect job of representing that old artwork. And it's one of my favorite head sculpts of all time in the Marvel Legends line. So you can take a lot of the negative things I said about the figure and a lot of the things about wondering if it justifies its existence, and you can kind of fold them in with me saying that this is like a definitive must-have head for Marvel Legends collectors. There's definitely a trade-off there, right? There's definitely an element of this to where it's like, okay, well, this element of this figure is a must-have. Maybe not so much everything else, but this part is just so important. And let me explain why. Because this pops off so easy, you can utilize it in other ways. But the funny thing is that this kind of look for Tony Stark really isn't appropriate for the era that they're trying to convey with the horn helmet and all of that. Tony Stark was much more like Mr. 60s retro man at that time with like the slicked back hair and things and more of the pencil mustache. He was not Mr. 70s. He didn't look like Charles Bronson like he does here. Honestly, if you want the most accurate representation of Tony Stark without his helmet from this era in the comics, you'll use the unmasked head that came with the Stealth Iron Man. This was it. Definitely made to, in my opinion, look like Timothy Dalton, the famous actor who played James Bond in License to Kill and The Living Daylights. It's funny that these are supposed to be the same guy, but they're definitely supposed to be. You have the Charlie Bronson over here, and you have the Tim Dalton, young Tim Dalton, as a matter of fact, over here. But this definitely represents the 60s, and this definitely represents the late 70s, early 80s. And if you want it to be as useful as possible, you're going to be using your Walgreens Silver Centurion Iron Man. This is where that would come in. But I have incredibly unfortunate news because I never realized it either. this had a head that was the neck and everything included, and this is never meant to be popped off. If I pop this off, it would just be a peg sitting there, and it would just be this like thin peg that I'm just setting this head on. We were so close to greatness. We were this close.
We're on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
And it didn't happen. And I have to say, this is so disappointing that it overshadows so much of my enjoyment that I would have gotten from this head. This is practically disastrous, in my opinion, because I was counting on being able to use this and never once actually thinking about that this was a full, like, I had totally forgotten that this neck was actually attached to the head sculpt. One of the only times that Marvel Legends has ever done that in recent years. There's not many other examples of this. Sure, there's a few, but there's not many others. This is a real shame. And so I have to say a lot of my enthusiasm is dampened. However, it does look really good on more of the modular armor Iron Man from the 90s, but if you're like me and you're an Iron Man comics aficionado, you know that this isn't accurate for how he looked in the 90s, those early 90s comics. You can't have like a demon in a bottle era like Iron Man head sculpt on this modular armor. Just knowing what I know about the comics, I can't make it work for me. He certainly seems a little more accurate and a little more at home on that kind of hologram type of Iron Man figure. But once again, if you're like me, then you know that none of this blue and all of this is really right for this head either. So it's kind of like you either have that Alex Ross figure to make this comic accurate, or you don't have much of an option. I do have one Iron Man figure that it could work on, and that is the often broken Stealth Iron Man figure. This would be accurate for this era. When Iron Man was using the stealth armor quite a bit, this would be just about right for Tony Stark's look. Now, bringing us back to the base figure that we're reviewing today, the actual base body, then there are some options that could go on this, like say, for instance, the hologram Iron Man head looks fairly decent on there. You can see that the red matches pretty well, even though this is a little bit lighter. The yellow might be a little paler, but it matches pretty well. But, however, if I angle this up towards the light, you may be able to catch that it's blue on the inside. Right now, there's kind of a shadow being cast where you can't really tell. But all of that is blue on the inside, which once again kind of hurts the comic book accuracy to me. In all honesty, it's probably the most neurotic I've ever been about something matching or something not being quite right. But I'm finding so many opportunities to feel that way with this guy. So in the end, this alternate head is really best kept on this Iron Man body that it actually comes with. So it's disappointing that it wasn't as versatile as it probably needed to be. Before we look at accessories, it is worth noting that this tampographic detail is way too far down on the front of the repulsor here. You can even see where it's bleeding kind of under it. And once again, for that premium price point, this is a very disappointing oversight. Probably a lot of them are like this, more than likely. But if you get to actually look at actual samples, then you probably need to check this out as well. So he does come with a few accessories, the alternate hands that I've switched on that just have holes in them for those repulsor blasts, so they're not really too useful in any other way. Plus, there's no hinge in these wrists, which is a really odd decision I've always found by Hasbro. You really do need some flexibility about the angle that he's firing these at, so I don't really understand why they leave that out. With these repulsor blasts that you plug in, these are extremely familiar to any of us that have collected the modern Iron Man figures. They just plug into the palms there, and they end up looking pretty good. They're done in a blue this time. You also get two of these smoke plumes that just go around the wrists, I guess to make it look like there's some exhaust coming from them as they fire, and they can be just kind of positioned different ways. They're sort of semi-transparent, as you can see, just kind of black. I'm not really sure I like the look of them and probably won't use them. It looks more like a symbiote has attached itself to like a classic Tony Stark. Or you could actually put it down here if you want to, so that you can wrap it around, I guess, the ankles and just kind of go crazy, I guess. But it doesn't really make sense that there's a smoke trail coming around here. So I'm not too crazy about the smoke things, but, you know, repulsor blast, we've just come to expect them. And finally, Iron Man includes this display stand. You can see it's just done in black plastic. It says Marvel Legends, done in the old font. Down here, we have it stowed away, all of their kind of legal information and I guess their translations and stuff, just so they could save some plastic. It's not solid or anything like that. You do get this card in the back, and on one side, you have the classic Iron Man cover with all of the different armors, which I thought was really awesome, and it looks absolutely terrific, I think. And I think this is just a lovely way to do it, and probably how I'm going to display it. You can see that over here, we have the classical Iron Man with the horns on the head. However, in this particular art, they've given him the triangular arc reactor, so it doesn't even match the figure that we got, so it's kind of weird. But on the other side, I have, yeah, you guessed it, a little bit of a problem with this. So this is meant to homage and just be such a wonderful celebration of that original Marvel Legends display stand. Oh, how great of the Hasbro team to think of that original display stand. It's so wonderful. Oh, this is just terrific, right? Well, that's probably what you're going to hear a lot of reviewers say. But I'm not here to be that guy. I'm here to tell you the truth, that this is a reminder of just how far we have fallen in terms of value, that we have a cardboard little insert that goes into an unpainted little plastic display stand that is a picture, like a piece of art of that original display, and they probably even still have the tooling for that display laying around. Just keep that in mind. And we used to get these fantastic 3D display stand, like diorama pieces, when we weren't getting Build-A-Figure pieces, and they were incredible. They were just beautiful works of art. And Eddie Wires and Jesse Falcon and all the guys at the original Marvel Legends team did such a great job of making sure that you got that extra value with a figure that, mind you, costed $8 20 years ago. Well, here we are 20 years later, and that $8 figure has morphed into this, and it has a lot better articulation, and it's a lot more, I guess, faithful in some ways to the comic art. But, I mean, there's not as much paint on this figure. You don't get a real display stand. You get, like, one little plastic thing. You get kind of a confused sort of look. An insane leap in price, even for 20 years. And I could have understood it more if this was your regularly priced $20 thing. But this is overpriced. And this, to me, is just an absolute slap in the face. I don't understand why you would point out the negligent thing, or the thing that proves just how far that we've fallen in terms of value, by creating a piece of art to commemorate it. I think that this is a poor idea on their part. It's fine artwork. Sure, it looks like the original. Sure, it might give you a member berry of some sort about what that is. But why would they do it? It looks fine with a figure in front of it. You can't really see it. But I mean, it's there. Like I said, I'll probably be much more willing to do it like this, because then it looks like a cool comic book cover. I actually like that quite a bit. But I'm telling you, there is so much about this figure that doesn't come together for me, with the crazy high price point, the kind of inconsistency in what they were going for with what comic book version they were trying to get. The one positive thing that I'm going to give it is the incredible unmasked head sculpt, and it is a beauty. It is an absolute beauty. To me, it would have been a true win had I been able to have used it with the Silver Centurion armor. And I know that this isn't exactly right for that time period. I'd say Tony Moore has more the Jerry curl going, but it still would have worked pretty well. And I can't help but be really disappointed at Hasbro's lack of foresight with that. It seems like sometimes Marvel Legends is the kind of line where you have like these modular accessories, and sometimes it isn't, and they just never really know what they want to be with that. I do think that looking at the Marvel Legends that they're doing for the 20th anniversary, I think Iron Man, it's very clear he is the cost-cutting sacrificial lamb out of that wave. He was the figure that was meant to recoup some of their costs so that they could spend more tooling on Captain America, and maybe not so much tooling with the Hulk, but certainly trying to cost him out where he's a larger figure. And this is kind of the one where they're like, okay, we'll throw on a new head and we'll do this and we'll just we'll put him out. So do I think it's worth it? Not necessarily, no. Wouldn't necessarily suggest him. For me, I'm a sucker for this unmasked head, so for me, I justified it. Do I think that many other people will justify it just on that alone? No, absolutely not. Unless you're like me and you're like some kind of crazy Iron Man purist, then it's not really one I can suggest. All right, friends, I sure do hope that you've at least enjoyed the information I put out today, even if it's been more negative towards the figure. Like I've said, I always want to try to be honest and accurate with you, and never just be that reviewer that just loves everything no matter what, and gives you an inaccurate impression of exactly what it is that you're buying as times get tougher. And I understand the complex reasons why the price of so many of these goods are going up, but at the same time, it's starting to become a little hard to swallow when they give you a piece of cardboard on an unpainted basic plastic stand and tell you that that's premium. I'm just not seeing it. And with funny things like the weird quality stuff about like the arc reactor can't even be placed, the decal can't be placed straight on the chest, then it's just a recipe for disaster. And it's not something that I think that we should just pass over as being okay, because it's really not. All right, guys, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on all the other reviews right here on Fanboys Forever. I have a lot more videos coming up very soon, so be sure to check those out. Also, be sure to like the video if you don't mind. I tried to give you a very informative review of a very lackluster figure, in my opinion, so hopefully it's helped you make a purchasing decision. I'm certainly hoping that when I get Captain America in, hopefully here very shortly, that I'll feel much differently about that release. And as always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.